Opportunity to get feedback from you guys also. You guys are, it's a DITA users group, which means you're using DITA, we're using DITA, everyone's using DITA. So I'd very much like to hear, questions or feedback or concerns or whatever you'd like to say. So there's a presentation for you, and we'll probably have the question and answers period later on. But if you have something in the middle, and if it's, I'll answer if it becomes if I'm going to be covering it later on, or if it becomes disruptive or something, then we'll table them until later. Okay, I don't have I'm not seeing the GoToMeeting, so if anyone's raising their hand or asking a question, you can.
I'll ask questions from the
right. Okay, I'm based in Israel, which is a 10-hour time difference. I flew in this morning, so at some point I might start slurring, at which point someone can get me some coffee and maybe I'll wake up again. But hopefully the adrenaline will keep me going. So the discussion is about the DITA classification scheme, which is a new part of DITA 1.2. It's actually something that's been around as I don't know if you've ever seen a plugin to DITA called the Thesaurus plugin. If you go to the source force, there was a thing called Thesaurus. So that was really like the kernel that became into this. So it's been slurping around the community for a while, and finally became part of the spec. Edge down. Okay, just a little bit about me. I work with Suite Solutions. I founded the company about, I guess, 4 years ago. Most of our experience is in implementing DITA. We have we have several customers in the room and in this area in general. We like to say we help companies get it right the first time, and thankfully over the past 4 years we've done a lot of implementations, and we've gotten a lot of experience. We like to say that we help to take all that experience and not all of them were in the beginning were necessarily, as smooth as they could be. But the idea is that the experience that we have at this point, we're able to help companies do it right the first time. We have a team of about 20 people on staff at this point. We've been growing steadily, mostly developers and DITA consultants, and we have a focus on what we call comprehensive content lifecycle implementation, which is trying to do an implementation of DITA from training, information architecture, conversion, style sheets, CMS implementations, and support, and basically a full range of services that one would need to get DITA up and running. That's the blurb about us, and then we'll launch into the more interesting things. Okay, so the main topics of the conversation of the talk will be first of all, try to identify the challenge that a lot of us have and a lot of our customers are having. We'll talk about what metadata is. We'll talk about why metadata stinks, and then we'll talk about what the DITA classification scheme is and how that can help. And we'll do some use cases, and we'll show a little demo that will hopefully demonstrate how this thing can be implemented for real. Okay, so the challenge for the information consumer, this is how we see it anyway. Again, if you guys see something differently or can expand on this, I'd be happy to hear. But the more and more the challenge for people who are using documentation are to get quick access to information that's actually useful. And the question becomes, what is useful? Useful is specific, concise information with limited number of links to relevant information. Based on what me I'm reading this, I'm using a product, I'm maintaining a product, I'm thinking about buying a product, whatever it is, based on what I need to accomplish by reading this document or this piece of document, how do I succeed in doing whatever I need to do? Who am I? What's my role in this? Am I an administrator? Am I a salesperson? Am I grandma who wants to put up my own homepage? What am I? What equipment am I using? Where am I located? Sometimes geographical location makes a difference about how the documentation should be. So these are challenges for the information consumer. When I'm getting information, I want to know. I would like to know that I'm getting information that's relevant to what I need and who I am and how I can succeed. Here are some examples. Let's say I'm a service engineer, and I want to know how do I install a particular piece of equipment. In this case, a valve is a real case. How do I install a particular valve? This case actually comes from a company that creates equipment that makes oil refineries. So the next time you want to build an oil refinery, you can go to this company, and they will put together the hundreds or thousands of pieces of valves and transmitters and things that they go in there. So I'm wandering around this big field. How do I install a particular valve using a certain protocol, communication protocol, using a particular version of a controller? Okay. Another example. I'm a support professional. I'm at a call center. How do I troubleshoot a cell phone, a certain model of cell phone that's to synchronize with a certain laptop running a certain version of Windows? Okay, this is something that you might imagine might happen. I don't know who I am, but I just need to update my maps and my GPS when I'm on my trip to Europe. Okay. So the challenge for people like us who are information developers is methods and tools to provide this information that's useful to our customers. And the question is, what is useful? And again, what understanding their goals. I mean, this can be a whole topic in itself, contextual design. I don't know if any of you guys have thought about that at all. I know at NetApp, I think you've thought about that at some point, at some level anyway. But the idea of doing some kind of contextual design, understanding what customers really want, what they need to get out of their documentation, but putting kind of that whole procedural thing aside, the idea of understanding who consumers are and writing documentation that, or really tagging up information we're going to be talking about in a way that we can deliver that information based on this context to whoever's going to be reading the document or the content. And that's based on our domain knowledge, meaning we categorize the content based on what we know about our products, about what we know certain procedures or information will be applicable. We know we try to know who's going to be using it and at what time periods and which part of the product life cycle. Okay, so based on our domain knowledge of our products, the idea is to try to what we call tag up the information or arrange the information or categorize or classify the information in a way so that when people are getting into it, based on whatever their context, we can get that information to them or they can find the information that they need. Does it make sense up until now? Okay. If anyone in the audience is shaking their head, they can let Scott know. Okay, but the problem is that if we spend all of our time tagging up information, then we wouldn't get very much work done. I don't know if you've heard that, metadata is a great thing, but people say, well, if you have too much metadata, then it just becomes a bear. It becomes something that you have to kind of like get on your neck, and it's hard to maintain all the time. So that becomes a classic problem of categorizing or marking up data. You agree? Right. So these are challenges for us. So there's a few different approaches for categorizing content. One is metadata, which is applying metadata to our content, either the topics or the maps. We'll talk about that a little bit more. There's a subject classification, which will be the subject of this talk, which is basically building a knowledge model of our domain, of our product and our subject matter, and apply it to the content. Now, some people ask, well, how about using conditional attributes for marking up the data? Whoever thought of using that or does use conditional attributes at some level to market data? It seems like it would be a possible way of maybe even a good way of doing it. But the problem is not when you get to a certain level, it becomes a very ineffective approach for a few reasons. Number one is based on conditional attributes or conditional publishing is based on excluding content. It's not based on including or providing particular content. The whole mechanism is based on hiding what's not relevant. So just from a philosophical point of view, it's not really the right tool. It's generally used for filtering. It's not used for retrieval of information. Filtering is generally used during publishing as opposed to online processing. And the last thing is that if we had to use conditional attributes to set every single categorization or classification of the data, then it would become very unwieldy to actually do real filtering or real hiding of information based on relevance. So we can talk about that again. It can be a whole discussion on itself, but I didn't want to throw that out there as a possibility and why the possibility is not really such an effective way of doing this. Okay, so we're going to talk about metadata a little bit, and then we're going to talk about subject classification. So the question is, what is metadata? Okay. So metadata is a word with 8 letters. So when you think about it, it's actually a pretty good definition of what data is. Metadata is data about data. It's descriptive information. It describes the nature of a publication, or in our case, a topic. It tries to describe what this information is applicable or effective for, who, and when. So, for example, these are a list of metadata that comes out of the box of DITA. Some of you have seen this before, right? Audience is a metadata and also a conditional attribute. Okay. Category, keywords, product information, list of versions, product names. Okay. There's something called other meta, which allows you to put anything like all the, whatever you don't find in the listing, shove it in there. And you can specialize new elements. I mean, data, the one at the end, is really meant for specialization. So if you want to make up your own metadata tag, you can do that. Okay, so here's an example of some metadata marked up. Who here marks up a lot of their information using metadata? Okay, several people in the audience. Okay, so here's something based on one of the previous examples. Audience equals service engineer. Category equals installation, meaning installation procedure, etc. Okay, but the problem with this, with metadata, is how do I relate now this information about this valve to the controller? Meaning, if I have a controller that can control hundreds of different types of valves or transmitters or different types of equipment, or if I have a device manager that can manage many devices. We're talking about Dell, or talking about all kinds of other types of equipment. So how do I relate my particular chip, my little piece, into a controller that controls a lot of these things? How about the protocol? How about what happens when my device gets implemented by new controllers or new types of equipment or new types of users are starting to use my products? Okay, so how do I relate this into the metadata of the topic? So it becomes a problem. It gets even worse because sometimes I'm documenting this valve, but I don't know necessarily which controllers are going to be using my valve and how that relates, and how my valve is going to relate to their controllers, right? It could be someone in my company. It could be someone else in some other company. Okay, so often we don't even know how to mark up our own data. Okay, so what's wrong with metadata? So first of all, there's a limited number of metadata elements. And yeah, you can specialize, as we just mentioned, but even after you're specialized, every time you specialize, you need to take those DTDs and deploy them to your authors, deploy them to the publishing, make sure that the style sheets are going to support them. So it's definitely possible, but it becomes unwieldy to expect to do it too often. Especially as the information model and the documentation grows, so keeping those DTDs updated with specializations becomes a process that, it becomes a bottomless pit and a very expensive one. It's difficult to relate the content to other contexts, like we said before. For example, with a cell phone. The cell phone can be used, in the context of synchronization. It can be used in context of all kinds of different ways, by different users, by different operating systems. It's difficult using metadata to relate to all these different types of contexts. Like I said before, we don't necessarily know what all the contexts are going to be. So when we've, I will posit that a best practice would be to maintain the categorizations in these relationships outside the content. So where have we seen that before? In DITA? Where have we seen the idea of maintaining information about the topics outside of the topics? In a map, right? So what do we use a map for?
Structure.
For hierarchy. And what else?
Linking.
Linking, relationship tables, right? For example. Yeah, I'm sorry, what did you say? I'm sorry? Mm-hmm. Okay, so these are examples of maintaining information about how the topics relate to each other outside the topics themselves. So I'd like to posit that we could be doing categorization or classification design. I mean, it's not my idea. You'll see soon that it's the classification scheme is really based on that. Okay, so now we're going to launch into the classification scheme, and we're going to give a little bit of background. This is the part where hopefully it'll be interesting, and hopefully I won't fall asleep at my feet. Okay, so the question is, what is information architecture for documentation? So a lot of people will give you different answers. You can go to different boot camps and different, you can go. There's user groups, not user place. There's Yahoo groups, just for people who are doing taxonomies and and information architecture. So what is information architecture for documentation? So a lot of us think of information architecture as defining what needs to be inside of a topic. Okay, what I'm going to be talking about now is really how we take all these kind of topics and put them together in some kind of an architecture. Okay, that's really the direction we're going to be going in with this talk. So information architecture can be a method of organizing documentation and resources into some kind of overarching knowledge model. Okay, that sounds pretty lofty. The knowledge model is created and maintained separate from the actual content, like a global index. Now, people in library science and people who work in libraries and reference publishers, they've been thinking about this stuff for a long time. For example, Dewey Decimal System, right? Everyone knows about that. What is that? That's basically classification that sits outside all the books, right? And it points to the books. You can classify all the books based on some kind of structure that sits outside of all that content. That's a pretty popular example of what we're trying to talk about now. Kind of like creating a global index. And imagine if you could create a lot of us, I think a lot of writers, we write a book or write a bunch of topics, put it into a book, and then at the end try to think, well, now I need to create an index now. Let me go create the index. So what do? We run around the book and we try to find terms that might be interesting, right? Now, wouldn't it be an interesting idea if you can create a list of terms that were interesting first and then use that to create the information? Or wouldn't it be cool if you could, conceptually, if you can create an index, a master index for all the different books you're going to be creating, and basically rip the index from the back of the book and then paste it onto all the books and just kind of link the terms to the page numbers, right? The idea is basically creating an overall knowledge model of what you're going to be talking about, and then linking the content into it. Does anyone hear of Steve Newcomb? No, so he's one of these guys who was popular in like the HTML world, who are again, this kind of library science type of thing. But he was very instrumental in setting up different standards like topic maps and groups and different things of ways of taking information and mapping them together. So he says that information architecture allows us to provide access to the information based on the model of the knowledge it contains. Meaning, instead of accessing information by a table of contents or by a search, the idea of accessing the information based on us knowing what information is what knowledge is in there, and then based on the knowledge of what's in there, we can go and get into that information, point into it. So it's at a simple level, if this can be done by hierarchy, right? Like Tom mentioned with a DITA map, right? For example, like a hierarchy or a taxonomy list of content, or relationships between the content, like relationship tables. On the next level is an organization of subjects and relating content to the subjects themselves. So, so the question is, what's a subject? The subject really is anything that we're documenting, a thing, an entity, an idea, a type of user, a type of equipment, a type of product, whatever it is that we're documenting about, and that relation, and from a conceptual point of view, relates to what we're trying to document, relates to our content. Okay, so some people are kind of glazed over a little bit. Is this kind of getting a little bit? Is this understandable? Okay, great. Okay, so now it's going to get a little more hairy. Okay. Okay. Who here has heard of Eric Keenum? I think he lives right here somewhere. Yeah. So he's been a data architect for, well, since DITA's been around probably, right? And he creates charts like this, and a lot of people have a hard time understanding them. So I'm going to try to. It took me a long time to understand this, but once I understood it, so I think it's a pretty powerful idea, and we'll try to discuss it. So when we talk about subjects and content, so the little green balls on top are subjects. A green ball can represent the name of a product, the name of a product series, the name of a type of a user, a type of audience, a type of user, a type of protocol, a type of geographical area, anything that relates to what we're trying to document. Okay. The little blue balls on the bottom are the DITA topics themselves, the content. Okay, so a little blue ball might be a procedure, it might be a concept, it might be a reference information. The little pink lines are how those topics, those DITA topics, relate together. For example, in some kind of a these hierarchy, they can be hierarchy or links inside of a map, and there might be a relationship or a hyperlink or an xref between them. Okay. Now the blue lines really are where we connect the knowledge model and the actual content themselves. So, for example, the green ball here would be the name of a certain transmitter or certain types of a certain electronic device or a GPS or whatever your company happens to make, right? And I make a blue line between that and the procedure for how to install that thing. So I've now basically made a connection between this a subject and the topic that describes that subject in some way. You with me? Got it. Okay, let's blast forward. Okay, the people in the audience, are they still there, or are they packed it one home? Okay. So the question, how can subject schemes help? So there's several ways that subject schemes in general can help. We're going to focus on maybe one of these balls, but I'll throw them out anyway. Subject schemes, again, this is a construct of DITA 1.2. It can help us standardize the subject matter. Okay, for example, index and glossary. As an example of that, let's say we want to make a list in DITA of all the legal index terms that can be, and then use those basically use those index terms in all different parts of our DITA content. So you can use that DITA using DITA 1.2, this subject scheme. Same with glossary or keywords. Okay, let's say you want to have one standard list of keywords, and everyone has to use those keywords. Okay, so that people aren't mistyping them or creating new keywords all the time, or using different terms for the same thing. And they call controls vocabularies. Right? You can show you controls vocabulary. You can use it to determine valid values for conditional attributes. For example, if you're using conditionalization like audience or product or platform, and you wanted to be able to standardize exactly what anyone can put in there. So you can use subject schemes to control that list as well. You can use it for associative topic navigation, meaning using relationships. That's where we're going to be going to soon, talking here. And the last bullet is relating to what I mentioned before, that if you can kind of plan out all your subject matter, then you can use that as a tool for figuring out what content you need to create. That's something that I can spend hours talking about, but we're not going to talk about it today. We're going to mostly focus on the third bullet. Okay. So the classification of the subject scheme is split into two pieces. One is to define the subjects, and the other one is to classify the content based on those subjects. Okay? So the subjects are classified or are created using what's called a subject scheme. And that's the thing that's used to create the defined set of values, controlled values for classifying. That subject set can change to adapt to new situations, like we talked about before. As you build this set of subjects, or the subject scheme, as your products develop, as the conditions for your products or the usage of your products develop, then you can constantly adapt that and develop that subject scheme to match your reality. It allows you to define relationships between different subjects. For example, different types of users might use a certain type of product, okay, or a certain product is used in a certain country or a certain geographical location. So these subjects are defined in the subject scheme map, which is, at the end of the day, a specialized DITA map. Okay, so when we peel away all the kind of the complexity or the whatever it is, whatever we're going to be talking about here, what we're talking about here is a specialization of a good old DITA map that we've all used and we all know and love. Okay. Classification is used to identify the subject matter of the content, and basically allows you to make those little blue lines between the subject matter and the content itself. Okay, and you can also, okay, next. So these scheme maps, like we said, are a specialized DITA map. So instead of having a collection of topics one after the other in some kind of hierarchy, okay, so you have a collection of of subjects, and we'll see an example of that in a second. You can nest them also, so you can create basically a hierarchy of subjects. For example, I have a market segment. Inside that market segment, I have different types of products. Those products have different types of product series, and those series have different instances of the product series. Of the 2400 series and the 2405 widget. Okay, so you can create a hierarchy or taxonomy of your products and everything about your anything about what you're producing based on this type of map. How many people here have companies who are creating like a corporate taxonomy to manage all the different products in your company. Is anyone else doing that? Now, it could be that your companies are doing it, you just don't even know about it. Because often what happens is, I've many times walked into companies and I start talking about this and say, well, we don't have any corporate taxonomy. And then when we, as time goes on, oh yeah, well, the marketing people actually they do have a taxonomy. Not only do they have a taxonomy, but they spent a huge amount of effort to create that taxonomy, and they're using it for some kind of a website, right? To manage their support site or manage their products, buying, what do they call it, marketing or sales sites and things like that. So often companies are doing this, and then we as tech writers don't necessarily know that that's happening. But we can latch into that, and we can say, okay, well, the organization already spent a lot of resources trying to define what's going on in our company, which products we have, et cetera. Maybe we can take that and use that for our documentation. That way we can make things more consistent between the documentation and the rest of the company. That would be a nice idea. Make consistent between documentation and everything else in the company. Okay, so we go back to that graph. So the subject key maps are really those little green circles on top. Okay. Next, here's an example of that. We already talked it out, but here's pretty much. Now it looks kind of like a map, right? Instead of topic refs, is topic subject defs. Even it rhymes even a little bit, right? Now has instance. What you can do is you can also, in addition to creating this hierarchy, you can use these things like has instance or has narrow or ways that you can define how the taxonomy or the hierarchy works. Okay, for example, if you have a bunch of if you're setting up a taxonomy of assemblies and subassemblies and parts, you can show that or describe that in the taxonomy also by using these elements. And we're not going to dive into that too much. Subject relationships. So data maps have relationship tables. So those relationship tables are used with the subjects also. So if you wanted to create relationships between the subjects, for example, products that are used by certain types of users or products that have certain types of features. Okay, let's say you have a whole feature set that your company supports using different types of products. So you want to say this feature is supported in this product and this feature is supported in this other product or this other version of the product. Or interfaces between interfaces and features. So if we were to go back to here, we're really talking about the relation, the yellow arrows, the relationships between the different green circles. Okay. And here's an example of this. And most of us use an interface, some kind of a GUI for making relationship tables. But if you were to look at the code, it would look something like this. You have a relationship table, and the relationship table usually has a header. In general, when we're used to using these relationship tables that have headers of task, concept, and reference. But in this case, you can create whatever you want. Okay, so I can make a relationship between features and user types. And then you can map out those subjects. Okay, and here's an example. Here's an example with the GPS. Different features. Preloaded maps, photo navigation that relates to a certain type of user. Can I open up a browser from here? Oops. What does that mean?
Oh, did you just share the app rather than the desktop? Yeah, because it's not broadcasting. Go back to the
Okay.
Yep, I'll be back.
Okay, let me go to this. There's lots of examples of this, but this happens to be one that I know. If I were to go to a site to buy a GPS, right? I want to go buy one. Close this up. There we go. So it gets this screen of one here. You guys seen something like this before, where you go to a site to buy something, right? And they say, well, who are you? What kind of things do you want? And by clicking down, you can You can pick if you already know what product you want, you can go and click on it, or you can go and say, well, what do I want to do? Well, I'm a globetrotter, and I like, like gadgets, right? And then it'll basically filter the information for you, or the type of products that would be useful for you. So really what they're doing here, in a way, is they're making relationships between a product on one hand and an activity or a series or a type of user or whatever have you. You get that idea? So let's go back to the presentation. Oops. Okay. This is an example how that could work. And I made this slide based on that. I just went to that site and tried to get some real examples. And this is that's where the slide came from. Okay, so the next part is we made all those green circles. They're all floating around, and they're all connected with each other in the map and with the relationship tables. Now it's kind of useless unless we can relate it down to our content. So classifying the topics using the subject is using what's called a subject ref. And here you have an example. So here in the map, we have a topic ref. Those are everyone's used to, right? Topic ref is a link to a topic. And then you can basically classify that topic by using a topic subject. So here I'm saying this topic called update maps is related to a certain product and a certain feature and whatever else it might be related to. Okay, as we see, this is the blue lines, and that's how we see basically how these green subjects are connected to the topics themselves. Now, if you notice here, I've mentioned before, but I want to kind of point it out again. These green circles here is like a separate layer from the blue circles. I mean, they can be managed and created and managed and maintained by themselves. So as we understand more about our products and the context and how they're used and everything else, that all these green subject matter is maintained. And then as we create our content, the content in the blue topics are the DITA topics in the bottom are maintained. And we're always kind of making these connections between the two. Okay. Okay. In the last slide, this is hard. Associating topics with subjects. We were talking about relationship tables relating subjects together between, for example, user types and products, or user types and geographical locations, or things like this. You can also create relationships between topics and between DITA topics and the subjects themselves also, in addition to those blue lines. Okay, so for example, if I want to have a relationship, a table between troubleshooting tasks and the product and interface that are used. So I have a product, the interface that needs to be troubleshoot, that may have a problem, and then I have the tasks that come to help troubleshoot that, or installation, or whatever have you. Okay, so it's a way of building, instead of making these blue lines where you're just basically classifying it, you can actually set things up. So if you have a web page that's just for troubleshooting, or an FAQ or something like this, and you want to organize things this way, you can make these type of relationships also right inside the map. Okay, there's an example of this. Okay. So if you have a topic, this phone does not connect to the device, so you relate that to a particular phone and the settings that you might need to go and reconnect that. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to show a little demo. It was developed by someone in our team named Michael Snoyman. He's sitting on his father's lap in the picture. Okay. Okay, any questions or comments before we move on? Yes. Yeah, that's a good question. So keyref is a construct in DITA 1.2 that allows you to do what's called indirect linking, meaning generally with hrefs you're pointing to a particular topic or a particular ID instead of a topic. With keyrefs, you're pointing to a key, okay, which is kind of like a key. I don't know how we used to call it. And that key, then later on you can link that key to a particular topic or a particular ID. Right. Exactly. Right. And so you can, and that file is that you use to relate the keys to the definitions of the keys is a DITA map. Okay. What that allows you to do basically is to set up a set of keys, and then based on different contexts of how you're going to be using the content, you can map the keys to different data topics. Kind of if you think about like variables, for example, so let's say you have a list of variables, and then you want the values for those variables to change based on how you're delivering the content or for who you're delivering the content. Okay, so you can point those variables, the keys to one data map that has one set of definitions or to another set of definitions, depending on how you're publishing. Does that answer the question? So key refs in data 1.2 is used in a lot of different ways. It's used for just for linking the content in the map instead of using it in href. It's used for conrefs. For example, if you want to do a link to a component, a content reference, you can, instead of linking directly to a particular topic and an ID, you can link to a key, and that key then goes and points to. Okay. So in this case, we're using keys also. So we're basically defining the subjects using a key, and that key really later on will be defined somewhere to point to a topic, and the topic is a description of that key. So if I have a key that relates to a product, I can have a topic that has a description of that product. Or if I have a key that's for certain types of user, like I'm a service engineer, I can have a topic. It points to a topic that describes, it's like the definition of that's what a service engineer is, or who he is, or what he does. Okay, or what he does in this context. What does that sound like to you? In the term and then definition. Glossary. It's really what it is. It's really, you're setting up a glossary of a list of subjects. Really is, defining a glossary and then managing those terms, or creating a hierarchy of those terms and relating those terms together. Okay. If you start, if you're zoning out one day and you really want to look into this more, and you start looking into taxonomies and information architecture and library science, so you'll start seeing things, terms, but people will use terms like glossary and thesauri, yeah, which is really the similar idea of what we're talking about. And they're sometimes they're used kind of interchangeably, and sometimes people will try to put their foot down and make a real definition for these things. But really, it's the same idea. The idea is creating a set of subjects or subject matter and then relating them together, making relationships between them, and then linking them to actual content that someone's going to actually read, like a book or a data topic or a graphic. Okay. Any other comments or questions before we move on? Oops.
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah.
So most of us, we're like in tech. So how does this, when you're actually publishing information, say like context help or a PDF file,
Yeah.
how is this taxonomy going to help us?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a great question. That's what I'm going to show you now. If I can get it up, I don't know why it's not coming up. Was that before? Here we go. Okay, so we created a demo to try to show how we'd use this. Now, remember when I'm showing you here in the site how you have this list of different types of features or stuff on the left, and then so this happens on different websites. I've seen this more and more. I don't know what they call this, but it's becoming more ubiquitous. So we're thinking, like, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this with tech docs? Like, if I'm coming in, instead of going to a table of contents or going to a search or to an index, say, you know what, I'm working on this product with this protocol. I'm a service engineer working in China. Okay, click, 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 and then I should get a list of all the topics that are relevant to me. Oh, and I'm doing an installation. Okay, just show me all the topics that are, or anything that we talked about before. I'm in Europe. I'm using this GPS. I need to download the new maps. Here's the topic, right? And I'll just start moving to the manual, doing a search, or doing a right. I think this would be kind of useful to be in technical documents. That's really where we can use this. So that's what the demo is going to try to describe. Let me cancel out of this. Okay. Okay. So what we did here, oops, where is it? Is being obstinate. Let me go here. Okay, here we go. Okay, so what we did was we set up a series of subjects, device along the lines of the demo of the example that we give in the presentation. So we have a series of subjects in taxonomy. So we have a series of a list of device managers and their versions. We have a list of different types of devices. Okay. And we have some protocols. We have some different types of tasks, and we can, depending on what you're doing in your company, you would make your own, right? But we set up a series of subjects, and we made relationships between them using the subject map that we talked about before. So what we did here was, okay, well, let's say I'm working on, like we said, let's say I'm working on a certain version of the tool of a certain device manager. Oops. Pick another example. I'm working on my computer, and demos always work better on your computer and no one else's. So that's why it's a demo and not production yet. That's kind of weird. Okay, I'm not sure why it's looking like this, but the idea is that like this. I click on the device. I may have to go to mic. Click on the device. I pick on the one that I want, and basically pre-filters the list of topics here to what I want to do, what might be relevant. Okay, that's basically the use case we're showing. I could show you better on my computer. It won't look so messy, but that's the idea. Okay, so the same type of thing. We created the subject scheme up here on the top, and then we made the little blue lines. We connected the subjects to the actual topics. Based on those blue lines, the classification between the topics and the subjects, you're seeing these little numbers here. Okay, so I know that there's how many. I guess I can switch now. I can see how many.
You might switch to Firefox because this is an older version of IE.
Yeah, let me try that.
So it probably doesn't support the style sheets.
Yeah, that's probably what's going on. Let me close this down. It's getting me very disoriented.
Yeah, so it's going to want to open, so right-click on it, and it thinks I have like a bunch of monitors. So, where's oh, that's the page.
Okay, great. Let's try this. Thanks. There we go. Let's see if there's any better. Okay, again, we'll start from the beginning. The subjects and the classification between the subjects and the actual DITA topics is what you're seeing these numbers here. So I know there's one DITA topic out there. Now this is a demo, so there's not so many topics here. But if I have thousands of topics in my documentation set, so I say these are all the topics that are relevant to this device. These are all the topics that are relevant to this protocol. These are how many installation topics there are, and there's how many troubleshooting. Now, it could be that these numbers are going to be huge, but as I get in here, I say, well, I'm working on this flow meter, right? I see, well, and the flow meter supports these two protocols. I see right from there, right? I don't have to do searching or whatever. I see right from there what's relevant to this. I see there's two protocols, and I see there's only one maintenance here. So I can just jump to this maintenance, or I can click on the protocol, right? And I see the topic that's relevant. Okay. And I can unclick them if it lets me, and then filter it. Again, there's a demo. It's not it's the idea though. Okay. Now, oops.
We used to call this sort of thing a decision tree.
Yeah.
It was all hard coded.
Yeah, I wonder if this is called a decision tree or whether I think it's less structured than decision tree because it's just really relating all the different contexts together, and then you just, when everything's classified together, it just kind of knows, okay, what's out there that represents the cross section of what I'm asking for. Now, let's say I go and click on it. I want to go and add a topic. Now let's imagine I'm an author. It's hard. It's easy to imagine, probably for most of us. Right? So let's imagine I'm an author, and I need to mock this stuff up. Okay. And let's say I'm working in a. So I created a DITA topic. Here's a. Just for the sake of the demo, we created like a little web-based rich text form here. Okay. Okay. So I want to describe exactly what I'm doing. I'm troubleshooting. When I was doing this, I was using. Let's see. Well, I was using this controller here. I was using a Delta V controller, and now that I clicked on Delta V, it filters here and it says, wait a minute, not all the devices are supported by the controller, right? So if I'm working on this controller doing the troubleshooting, and I try to click on this transmitter, it's not going to work because that transmitter is not supported by that controller, right? And that knowledge was done based on the relationships we created in the subject scheme. Okay, so I click on I can choose the transmitter that. I clicked on the device that's supported by that device, and by that device manager, and I see here that these protocols disappeared because this transmitter is only supported by only supports this one particular protocol. Okay, I click at that, and I can say this is a troubleshooting task. Okay, so we see how the subject scheme can help us in two ways. It can help us from retrieval, from a user's point of view. It can also help us from an authoring point of view, as saying it's helping us keep in context based on us knowing how everything relates together. It'll help us to direct the markup or the categorization of the content. Well, first of all, making sure that we don't make mistakes, and also for helping also for kind of like debugging a little bit as you're marking things up and you're developing things. As you see things are flashing on and off, you know either I'm doing something wrong or maybe something has to be added to the subject scheme or whatever have you. So it can really be used in two ways.
I think it's a particularly good demo because the hierarchy, as soon as you see the hierarchy in front of you, you start imagining what kind of metadata you have to put in place in order to have that person happen. Your mind kind of spins. I can see how it would make it much easier.
Right. Yeah, from interface point of view, I think it's easier to do it this way than to go and start adding metadata elements right? Now, to bring this a little bit further, DITA maps. We know that DITA maps you can link like a DITA map into another larger DITA map, called submap. People call them submaps. You can take a topic ref and map it to a. Okay, so subject schemes are really the same way. And remember, we talked about that. We don't necessarily know all the different ways that our products are going to be used. Right? I'm documenting this transmitter now, but it could be later on. There's a real live example. Okay, so let me explain the example, and then maybe you'll get where I'm coming from, or you'll understand how this can be used. In this example, there's a company that has 15 different divisions making devices. Okay, now there's other part of that company that are creating the device management controllers. So the people who are developing and documenting the transmitters, they don't necessarily know what the device is going to be. They don't even care. I just want to document my transmitter. I don't care who's going to be using it. I don't let them deal with it and what protocol they're going to be using. I know my transmitter. I'm supporting these two protocols. Do whatever you want. Okay. So with this kind of a setup, right? When the whole organization has a subject scheme, so the transmitter people are developing their part of the subject scheme. These are our transmitters, the different series of the transmitters, different parts of them, who might be the user types and the protocols, etc. Right? And they may be seeing 3 of these blocks, or maybe other ones that are relevant to them. On the side of the device managers, they don't really care about, certain things they don't care about, but they've gone and they've marked up in their part of the subject scheme their list of device controllers and which controllers that they support. Okay. So if I have 3 different divisions or different companies in the world that are supporting these devices, so these guys have a list of ones they support, and these ones have a list that they support, and these ones have a list that they support, and it all really feeds into one big, really master subject scheme, one really master map, and they all feed into. So when this thing all gets uploaded to some big support site, right? All these things, since they're maps, and maps fit together using topic refs and everything else, they all basically come together into one big, happy overarching model. And then the user has one way of getting to all the information they need. I'm coming in, I'm an engineer, I'm working in China, I'm using this controller today, tomorrow I'm using some other controller, today I'm working on one device, today I'm working on some other device. Is one place, and one place to get the data, and everything is basically unified. And that's the dream.
I think that just answered my big question was, what's the advantage of doing this the DITA way versus doing it in another external system like a CMS or a database? Like a lot of times when you see a website do it for faceted search, they just are using different database tables and they're kind of doing some joins and stuff. And that's how they get kind of the same kind of thing. Here, I think what you just explained in your scenario there was probably one of the key advantages of this method is the interchange. So if I'm a big, large company, let's say, and I have a bunch of OEMs who I need to grab their product in and grab their information about those products in, if they are all using the same kind of classifications, I can just take their content, take their classifications, and make sort of this oversight kind of thing that would, and I don't have to do a whole lot to massage that or change it. I think that's what I just heard from your scenario.
Right. So I think you answered the question. You answered an excellent question and answered the market. Yeah, that's a lot of people, several people have said, this is great, but you just recreated the wheel with RDF, there's topic maps, there's all these kind of scopes, all these things that are out there. So why are you doing this again? You know, my first reaction, I didn't do it. Eric even did it. No, but the idea is, this is an excellent question. So why recreate the wheel? There are people doing this already. I think a good answer is partially what you said. First of all, it's all in one big happy family. And second of all, it's because it's in one big happy family. Because if I've already invested in DITA as not only in authoring, right, and in domain knowledge of how to do the DTDs and everything else, but also the publishing and all the tools and the infrastructure and everything that went around to using DITA. So why not keep use that infrastructure? That's one answer. The second answer, which is part of that, really, is that once you're building everything in, since this stuff is really just a specialization of a map and relationship tables and everything else, so really, theoretically or realistically, a little bit of tweaking, the same publishing that you've set up for using DITA, for example, using how to publish relationship tables and how to publish DITA maps and how to create navigation, how to create hierarchies. So you can do that. You can publish that stuff. You can publish this basically using the infrastructure that you already have in place.
That was my next question was, what's the support in the toolkit?
Yeah. So Michael, the guy here, who was when I first told him to make this demo, he said, I told him to use the toolkit, and so he said, it doesn't work. He says, do you want your demo to be ready before the conference or not? But basically, it partially works and partially doesn't work. It's like everything else in the toolkit. Once people start using someone, people will start fixing it up. But the basic support is already there in general. To bring that, to give an example of that, if we have the relationship tables, right, the DITA knows how to, on the bottom, to make a list of related links. Okay, so you have a relationship table in the topic in the map, and so at the bottom of each topic, it knows how to put a list of related links when you publish to HTML or even to PDF, right? So really, if you're creating a relationship table like this in the DITA map, so you can also should be able to create, it won't be related topics, so maybe related subjects or something else, right? But all this information can be getting into the topics when you publish it also. And that really creates a whole new way of navigating, because you're really navigating not based on the hierarchy of topics or the relationship between topics, between DITA topics, but now you can create a whole navigation scheme based on that knowledge model using the same interface. Oops. Okay. Okay, to blab on a little bit further, I think you mentioned, or someone mentioned that I think Gracie mentioned that these website people, like the Garmin site that we showed before, they're spending huge amounts of resources to make those little trees on the left side, and a lot of that is probably like way hard coded, right? Or using CMS systems that are just based on for web marketing or sales or things like that. It's not something potentially suited for what we're trying to, for online help, for knowledge bases and things like that.
It seems like you should be able to use the data, if you set up a website, you should be able to feed it this data and have it return, render that kind of a tree. Or the fact that they may have set up some mechanism for doing that and they've got it in a database, you should be able to export that to the DITA model.
Yep.
It's just the same data rendered differently,
right,
or modeled differently.
Right, so definitely two things like that happened in real life. So once I've been pounding the earth, kind of showing this to people. I say, wow, that's pretty cool. So people, on the one hand, people said exactly two things like you just said. Some people said, geez, our SharePoint web development team has been struggling with this. They just can't get it right. The stupid things on the left and the filtering and how do they maintain the taxonomy is just like, it's verkackt, which means it's screwed up. Is verkackt an English word? Is Yiddish? So it's just messed up. It's completely screwed up. So they said this could really work because here you have an organized way. You can use, you can set up an interface to set up these maps or whatever have you. We can use that for the website. The other hand, they all say, oh, wait a minute, we have a system that's already doing this here. I can spit out an Excel file from this taxonomy package that they created. So why create the wheel? Let's take this, create a path that we can take the taxonomy that the taxonomists in the organization are creating. And we'll pipe that into our data. And so we're not maybe we're not managing that data in our data files, but we can take that taxonomy and expand on it, because it could be that those people in the marketing section, they care about certain things, but we as documentation people, we need to drill down a little bit for a few more levels because of information that's useful for us. And so we can plug into that, and then we can publish that whole thing together.
You corner up pushes right into the middle.
Yeah, like that. It'll really make your head hurt.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to track how closely this maps to RDF, which is like the classic ontology model for modeling knowledge. It seems like the verbs I saw were very similar, so it seemed like you could push out RDF files from these relational tables.
Yeah, you probably could. You probably could.
So is it based on that framework?
Yeah, it's based on there. It's kind of based on the similar type of. Yeah. The answer is the answer. These knowledge models. Right now, can you open up XMetal and make many of these maps? Yeah, you could, but it'd really be kind of unwieldy, right? So we're looking at different tools that support RDF or support what's something called topic maps. That have nice interfaces for, like web interfaces for creating these things, and then pushing that out into a DITA map. So basically, like using those tools as a round tripping thing. So yeah, the answer is yes.
What kind of tools exist right now to do that?
To do what we're talking about, what I just talked about now.
You're basically inventing this.
Not yet. I wouldn't call it inventing. I think we're trying to take tools that exist already in the library science world and using them for ourselves. And since, like Tom mentioned, since the standards are so similar, since those standards are very similar to what what the classification scheme that I just presented is, since they're so similar, then you can use those tools, and instead of piping out like an RDF file, we'll pump out we'll basically convert that from an RDF to a DITA map, basically, and vice versa. So basically, the idea of configuring those tools, in the loose word of configuration, we're adapting those tools to work for us in DITA.
Is this demo like an offering? It's just for offering?
This is what we're seeing here? Yeah, this we threw together as a way that you can put this on like a support site or a way that engineers, for example, can get in and add their own content. And the idea would be that there's a simple rich text form that would convert itself into DITA.
I always said it like for support people so that they could select this and then actually spit out a PDF in the language or have it and then be able to send that.
Yeah, so that's something we're working on. We have a customer who's commissioned us to do that. meaning exactly what the form looks something similar to this. If I was on my computer, I could show you, but I'm not, so I can't, or at least not now. But it's this form that looks similar to this, and this is for these engineers who are in labs who don't see the light of day very often. And they're creating how-to articles using this, and they don't know about DITA. They just they have a rich text form like this, and they type this up, they click the things on top, and then it's creating DITA topics. And then the idea is that they can go and they can go and pull out some of those DITA topics and create a PDF or a help or whatever they want.
So is there implicitly an XML file being maintained?
Yeah, actually there is. There is, but it's on my computer. What I can do is the people in the audience won't see it, but I can show that to you. Yeah, I can show you that. I can show you that DITA topic, that DITA map that's being generated on the fly.
So we can actually put it on the other one if you want. Pretty sure.
Any other questions or comments or feedback?
This is all based on taxonomy. I have a this topic is under this one. Have you thought about trying to work out something where things are a bit more parallel and multi-dimensional?
I don't think you're defining relationships. If you define them in a hierarchical set of definitions, then it's hierarchical. If you define them in other ways, then it wouldn't be. Just like if you're familiar with RDF, it's the same thing. You can define a very hierarchical tree, or you can define just a set of represented in the tools work.
And there aren't tools to work with those sorts of things.
No, there are tools to work with RDF and render RDF, but there's databases to deal with explore that stuff. So I think this idea, I think, a jumpstart. You can really work on an existing knowledge base, but bring it into much more practical. People don't maintain RDF trees, it's just too hard, right? But here, it's much closer to, I think, something people work with. And I think it has much more immediate benefits. I think it's bringing something that's been cooking in that back room with a bunch of very, geeky ontologist library, as bringing it right to where I think people will touch it. It's very interesting. This is good stuff.
Is there any query language? I know that you can do queries, right? XML.
Yeah.
But the way you're showing us is very manual. Like you have to enter and do all this relationship yourself. Are you guys working on any type of way of querying topics?
That's a good question. So just like Tom was mentioning RDF and different standards that do what we're talking about now, it is another way of doing this kind of semantic web. So those standards have also a set of tools that allow you to do very sophisticated querying and
because querying using XSLT or something is like
you can't use it's very difficult to that what we're doing here with XSLT. Yeah, so we're looking at the similar direction as like we're looking to use those to find tools that already work in this to build taxonomies and to build these types of these maps, and then spill that out to a DITA map instead of a RDF file or a topic map file. So using those query languages also. So once you take this DITA map and supply it in a format that these tools know, then you can have all the power of all these tools that are already developed. I'm sorry.
Some of the parsing is really slow. Are there ways to speed it up?
The RDF engines can be quite fast to perform. I haven't seen them in a couple of years, but the work isn't maintaining the tables. If the tables are maintained, queries can be pretty quick, but it's maintaining these tables and consistency in those tables. Well, I mean, what's your take on query? How would that look into it?
Yeah, so there's different ways you can, I'm not so familiar with the syntax and things like that, but there's ways you can say, okay, basically query, you can, I'll put it this side. And it's kind of like we're making clicks on different things, so you can basically write a query that says, I'm looking at this, where it includes this subject and this subject, but not that subject, and then it'll give you a list of all the content.
How long does it take to return? Because when we're looking at like a real database like SQL, like your return is fast, even on a large database. But when you're looking at querying XML, right, it's a really slow process because of the way it's going, looking for the information.
Yeah, so it's really
Well, what you're mapping isn't the XML, but these relationships between nodes, right?
Okay. So this is going to speed up the...
Well, I think your query is typically going to be, you've got a constrained set of terms, right? So those under the covers will represent nodes. So I think it depends on the implementation, and I think it's still abstract right now, but these queries could be quite fast, because it's really just actual intersection of set.
in the demo that we showed here, so where we click on we choose a device manager and it pre-filters these things. So there he's using some kind of mathematical model to do this. He's basically loading into some kind of a table, some kind of mathematical, I don't understand, it's way beyond me. But he knows what he's doing. And he basically built a structure, a data structure that represents this, and then for him it becomes very, very quick.
Because of the repetition of constantly referring to the same things, or how does this grow?
From a technological, they're setting these things up, right? We're talking about here, like how to create these maps, and there's like the pyrotechnics underneath that knows how to, when I click on something, how it knows to pre-filter these things, and that's the different mathematical algorithms that people can develop and how to. But these are tools that exist already. And we, as a data community, we can say, okay, now we have this new 1.2 data scheme. Let's go and create a whole new set of tools. So we don't have to, really, because there's so much that exists out there that's so similar that we can adapt that, basically. That's our point of view, anyway.
So in reference to the question, there's some tools that can do a protocol or a query language called xquery. And there's some commercial tools. Documentum owns one now because they bought xHive. There's also an open source one called Exist, and probably the leader, or kind of the one that you hear a lot from live is MicroLogic, who's the president of UNESCO. And they all basically talk this query language called xquery, which allows you to query XFL. They all have their own advantages and disadvantages, but that's something that you can imagine being under the hood of something like this.
Well, the problem with xquery that I have is I've tried to do something similar to this.
It depends on the server that you're querying against. I think MicroLogic will build a search like index, and so it'll look at the index first and then pull stuff out for you. I think Exists can do something similar. I mean, they're all the commercial applications have a similar kind of pre-caching or something like that. So it depends on what you're using to do the xquery. What were you using to do your xquery? Yeah. So since you're kind of abstracting it through some different sort of thing, these servers will just speak xquery natively, and basically just reach the graph. So it can be very fast.
I don't think these are xquery, because these are relationship tables. So you're not actually scanning. If you think about the problem you're solving, you're not scanning for version 6 in an XML file and finding where all the places that exist and then filtering backwards. You're actually, that's a node in a tree of relationships. So the problem is a little different. I don't actually think it's xquery for RDF.
Yeah, and certainly the way that this is implemented would not that this is an xquery, but you could do something similar using one of an xquery model.
But what he's showing though is more built manually, right? Like you've already sat down.
No, I know. this is, I think it's dynamic. He's defined a set of tables, and that dynamically builds a set of indexes which are going to rapidly return results. As you said, it's just sort of a mathematical set theory that can be very efficient for this, because you're just talking about this set of nodes overlapping with this set of nodes. I would look at implementing something like this in Redis or something. It's a very fast indexing tool that lets you just, or a non-SQL database would be the wrong way to do this stuff.
So I just went to, I went to Google, right?
Yeah, this,
Right around the corner, and I queried RDF query languages. A lot of them, some of them are they're standards, right? There's standard, they're ISO, they're W3 standard from 2004. These are things that are that have existed for a while, and we can harness them. There's an example. There's something called topic maps, which is an ISO standard that has its own set of queries and query languages that are they themselves just like X queries are standards. So they have standards ways of doing queries in those languages also, those sets of data. And so what we're seeing here with the DITA maps is really something very similar. It's just really the syntax is different, right? But really it's the same idea. So you can relatively easily port between the two. So if you can port, let's say, DITA maps into RDF, and RDF uses the query languages, then basically you have what you need. That's the idea. I have on the screen here. So someone has to see that file. So this is the XML file for the subjects, where it's classifying the subjects. So we saw this there's a topic, and then it's referenced by the different subject wraps, the key wraps, the protocols and things like that. And this is the DITA map that has all the subjects, the whole hierarchy of that scheme. I can show that to you more close up. I can send you the file if you like. Take a look at that. And that's basically, so you really it's a running hierarchy basically. And basically what we did was every top part became its own box on top. So we have device managers was its own box in the interface, and devices was its own box in the interface. It's like master, like roots in the taxonomy. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? If anyone's still there?
Still there. Great presentation. I'm going to sign off now.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for joining.
Get a copy of that slide.
Well, I can these this here. Yes. No, but I can send you this. I can send you these files. Yeah. Scott's going to remind me. Yeah, I can send you the files. I can make the presentation available also if you'd like that. Okay.
So Joe, would you say that Suite Solutions is working on home in this area as tribute with RDF tools?
Yeah, so we're working in a few different areas. Well, we're not necessarily using RDF, we're looking at something else, particularly something called topic maps. But we're working in a few different ways. One thing we're doing is can I put this up? How do I put this up? Is there anyone else online? Okay, so if I draw, they're not going to. Okay, so okay, so I'll draw it out. So we're working different in the authoring point of view and also the publishing point of view. So one thing we're doing is getting these working on a way to get these boxes up here. This kind of interface inside something like XMetal. So as authors are going and creating topics, or someone else who isn't creating topics, who's basically taking content and needs to categorize it using their own, so they can go in, they can open up a topic, either an XML or something else, and then use an interface like this to to classify things. As part of that is the interface. Part of it is deciding which part of the subject scheme needs to be is relevant to the author at that point. Part of it, since this information is really being stored in the map, then map is really being stored in the CMS or either CMS or on a server somewhere. So the idea is that this would be communicating with the DITA map instead of CMS. So that's one direction we're working on now. The other direction we're working, or as part of the implementation that we're working on, is the idea of it's not canceling, but the idea that remember that the thing that we saw before. These things up here is to make that as part of a web help. So in web help, usually you have a talk, an index, on the left pane, right? So we want to make another. We're working on a third tab, which you would have here. So if you're getting into a document, you can either navigate to a talk, to an index, or use this, being able to drop down and click on the boxes, and then have it pre-filter the topics.
Feature.
So that's the second direction. And the third thing that we're working on is like someone mentioned about creating these taxonomies, using a tool that some kind of tool that already exists to create these maps, these taxonomies and everything else, and then port that out to a DITA map. Basically, have the DITA map being the output or the source file, and then using these tools to edit them. That's basically what we're working on. So we're trying to take this and weave it into a complete solution. From the managing the subject scheme itself, authoring the content, and retrieving the content. Okay. Okay, thanks for your attention. If you have any comments either now or later, I'd be very happy to hear, because this is for us, it's a work in progress also. So I'd be definitely interested in hearing feedback and ideas. Thanks.
All right.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Thanks, Joe.